Welcome to What is Going On for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandy Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello, welcome to the Energy and Integration series, in which internationally respected authors, speakers and spiritual facilitators Jim Self, Lee Harris and Suzy Miller share their individual takes on how the current cosmic energies are influencing us this month. Looking ahead, Lee Harris joins me in segment 2 to expand on the key topics, new chapters, dark nights and new identities, which are the focus of his energy update this month, while Suzy Miller will round off the programme in segment 3 with an explanation of why now is the time to focus on birthing the one you. But first, it's time to welcome back Jim Self. Jim, hello.
Hi, Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Nice to be here as always.
Jim, for someone who tends to shy away from making outright predictions, you dropped a pretty big one in response to a comment I made when we were speaking earlier today. I don't know whether you want to just wade right in with that one or prefer to ease into it by first sharing your observations of the current energies in general.
Well, let's talk about the current energies. It's interesting. You know, I talk about these different waves of light that are coming in, and some of those waves of light are very disruptive, meaning they are interrupting the status quo, while others are very uplifting and providing new considerations for application and consciousness. And one of the things that I'm watching this month that is really very interesting is when you start to look at how the world is unfolding. If I use politics, not talking about politics, just as the events that are going on, there is a lot of disruptiveness in the process of politics. And one aspect of that is, as I watch people, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to engage with. They don't like it in some cases. Other people like it. But generally, there's a sense among people that are spiritually based that this doesn't feel good. This is off-balancing. But one of the pieces that I'm watching is as an individual begins to decide to own themselves, to stand up for themselves, to choose who am I and how do I engage with the world rather than letting the noise push them all around. These waves of light that are coming in are very, very empowering from the standpoint of they are allowing people, as I'm watching, to recognize that there is a shift, and just by them holding these, a sense of power, an opportunity of the positiveness in these waves, there's a coalescing of vibrations where I'm watching where, if you had asked me last month, are you optimistic at all about the unfolding of this political nature of the world anytime soon, I would have said no. It's going to change, but not right now. But these new waves that are coming in through the equinox in September and then on into December and the solstice, they are very empowering in terms of a person's thought to think, I'm not in agreement and I'm wanting this to change. It's just that thought from the place of this is who I am. And this month, as I'm watching these waves, I think there's a lot of disruption that has the system actually now very off balance, but it is those of us who simply say this is not acceptable from a place of power and certainty and strength and owning their own seniority. This is who I am. You're going to see some changes in this next 3, 4, 5 months that I would not have said I would have thought would happen last month.
You know, when you and I had a conversation earlier, I was struck by something that you said. One of the things that I've been very aware of lately is how people seem to be almost in a trance of disbelief at what is happening around them, because it's almost as if reality, what they think is reality, is fragmenting, and they're beginning to understand that, what they've been experiencing isn't reality at all. But you said something about how, people under the age of 65 have not had many people not had, especially in the West, true crisis in their lives. Many people under the age of 65 have just kind of, floated on the back of all the hard work that was done by, first of all, their grandparents, parents in the war, various different wars. And I've been noticing, since I've been back in England, an awful lot of young people who really have no idea about the world at all. And they have very strange ideas about the world, and they don't understand what others that have gone before had to put up with. It's been too easy for people. It's almost as if we've been living in some kind of little marshmallow dream for the past 60 years or so.
Yes, that's real correct. I mean, since in the United States particularly, since the Vietnam War, the average person has had no significant crisis. Now, there have been many who've gone to Iraq and Afghanistan and those kind of things. But when you think about the kind of generally whatever the average person is, in the last 60 years, it's been economic success, it's been educational expansion, it's been job opportunity. You basically assume you're going to get a new raise at the end of the month or the end of the year, because that's how it works. And I'm going to get a house, and the house is going to keep going up in value, and I'm going to have lots of money, and that's how it is. There's no drama in that. Now, people have their ups and downs. But one of the things that happens is, in that no drama, there has also been no real need to establish value and belief in some level of, this is what I'm all about. This is what a democracy is about. This is what respect, dignity, integrity is all about. I'm standing up for. That hasn't had to be demonstrated in people's realities. And so you're watching a lot of people now really saying, this doesn't feel good, but I don't know what to do. I want to do something. What you're starting to see, and it's just kind of in this last week, again, if I use politics, the Bob Woodward book coming out, and then the anonymous email coming out talking about the internal operations of the White House. Now, I'm not going into politics, but the turmoil that's out there is beginning to have a shift to it. So one person stands up and others say, me too, and another person stands up and says, me too. And this me too, in terms of, this is what I believe, is beginning to come back and solidify into an opportunity. And that is very exciting, because going into these next 10, 15 years, we also talked about this concept of the new human being. And the new human is a fascinating conversation to have, but it is about the directions and the opportunities for literally a new human species, a number of new human species, to evolve over the coming years. Some of them biologically and technologically oriented, some of them technologically and some biology oriented. There's the whole aspect of the one that I'm most fascinated with, is this Christos, this human Christed being, which is the one that we were all talking about here and pointing to. How that evolution from the standpoint of seniority and beauty and trust and respect and dignity and love is now beginning to be a choice in these new waves that are being presented.
We're hearing a lot about the new human lately, and Suzy Miller is somebody who will probably speak to that later in the show, but ever since I've known Suzy, she's been talking about the new human long before I heard anyone else talk about it, and the collective consciousness of the children, which she works with and channels, has been saying that this is the new human is... they are the new human. Many of these autistic children, many of these gifted children, they are representative of the new human that we all have the possibility to become probably already are, but we've been so cloaked, I think, in this dream and limitation, that we haven't been able to see that.
Yeah. Now, Suzy's done a great job, for as long as I've known her too, just bringing this concept forward. And it has been in the new children, in them coming forward, and in that youngness, in that beginningness. But when we start to look at it right here, this concept of new human is actually much more of a consciousness that is beginning to present itself in form, in opportunity, in thought form, as well as physical choices of expression or creation. And so you're beginning, if you think about an aspect of consciousness, you think back to the time of Leonardo da Vinci and the Renaissance, it was this basic new set of considerations nobody had ever thought of that presented themselves, and then it exploded onto the scene. We are in another one of these Renaissance periods. This time is really fascinating because it's more exponential. It's not only the young kids coming in who are bringing it with them, it's the thought that you think just randomly in your head, wouldn't this be interesting? But what you're seeing is a consciousness that is now coming into form. And think about it from the standpoint of if you handed an idea, a conceptual awareness to young people at MIT, at Oxford, at London School of Economics, at the Sorbonne in France, and you said, what do you do with this? You'd come up with 50 different directions based on the new consciousness. And that's what's unfolding here in the most remarkable ways.
I sometimes wonder, we've been having these conversations now for the last 9 months, gathering you, Lee and Suzy together, and every time, some very profound stuff is discussed and revealed to us. And I always wonder after the show whether people really understand what is being pointed out to them. I mean, this whole dreamlike, trance that I mentioned earlier, I see it everywhere around me. And maybe I didn't see it so clearly before, so maybe I'm not even fully understanding what is being pointed out to me. But it just, when I look at it energetically, it feels like, when a piece of glass is smashed and it all comes crumbling down. And that's what I'm seeing with reality, as if it's all going to suddenly just crumble down and we are going to see beyond that to something else.
Well, I think that's very real, and we could get into a great conversation around that. In a way, in my simpleness, you can't take your baggage with you on this journey. And so that construct of fear and limitation and imposition and domination, greed, those type of words, concepts that have been acceptable in the society are no longer acceptable to this fifth dimensional energy configuration. And so you're watching a number of things. People arguing for their limitations because they're scared to death about what they're going to lose, and they don't know where to go. That's kind of the average person on the street. You have a lot of spiritual people that are beginning to move into an interesting aspect of awakening. They're beginning, let me say it this way, the person on the street is really unconscious of being unconscious. They couldn't hear this conversation we're having. But many spiritual people are beginning to have an experience that's, in fact, somewhat uncomfortable. They're beginning to become conscious of being unconscious, meaning all that stuff I've stuffed into my backpack that I never want to see again, and I don't want anybody to know that I did these things. Can't take the baggage with you, and it's all beginning to bubble up to the surface, and that has a lot of people's attention. Simultaneously, though, these same people are beginning to become conscious of being conscious. And in that space, these new concepts, these new fractured considerations, as you say, breaking the glass, and presenting multiple fractals, multiple refractions of light, of new choice, people haven't figured that out yet, and they don't know what to do with it, and then others are beginning to embrace it. So I think that's the evolutionary path that we're on in this spiritual space. Many can hear, many say, wow, that was really good, and then 2 minutes later you say, what did they just say? And it's like, I don't know. It was good, it was really good, but I don't know. And that's okay. That's really okay, because it's there. And everybody's waking up as they wake up. And much of the information will be there for them without them ever realizing they didn't apply that just a minute ago.
Well, we have about 1 minute left before the break, and I just want to go back to that prediction that you surprised me with earlier today in our conversation, when I told you that I had a sense of waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you said the shoe is going to drop. Now, I've not heard you, make such a bold prediction before. Do you want to say a couple of words about that before we close?
Similar to what I'm saying is as the individual begins to know themselves, or stand up for themselves, or begin to choose a direction of well-being, that vibration is beginning to be very magnetic. And it's beginning to basically stand in the face of those who think they can just bully their way through life and push everybody away and change laws and take advantage of, impose their will upon. And this level of light that's coming in now over the next 5, 6, 8 months, I am willing to say you're going to see some extreme disruptions in the movement forward of imposition and taking over control of the world from a singular set of points of view. It's going to change.
Jim, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for joining us this month.
Sandy, as always, I love being here with you. Blessings.
Okay, bye. You're listening to What is Going On's Energy and Integration series. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and we'll be back after this break with Energy Guide, author, intuitive and channeler Lee Harris. So don't go away.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
My name is Meera Batra, and this is How I Live United. Many families have come to America for a better life. I advocate for these families with United Way. United Way empowers them to see opportunities available. We help them get involved with their kids' schools and network within the community. My name is Meera Batra. I help families see opportunity and succeed. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, and welcome also to author, energy guide, channeler, artist and musician Lee Harris. Lee, new chapters, dark nights and new identities. Tell me more.
Hi Sandy. Well, first of all, I love listening to you and Jim, and it got my whole body lit up because there were certain things that you were saying that are things that I've been waiting for many years and have had messages about. And I agree with both of you that, this really is a new time. But just to go back to the beginning of your conversation with him, the word new came up a lot. And for me, as someone who tracks the energy month after month in my energy updates, it was very clearly told to me all the way through August that September to December was a brand new period, and that the last 3-4 months had been quite a shakedown for people. And of course, you could argue that's been going on for years, but there was a real intensity for many between April and August, and a lot of sudden change or sudden shifts or being relocated or feeling like a part of your identity is gone all of a sudden. And it was preparation for this very new phase that we're in now, September to December, so a lot of new can come in. And it's interesting, I was listening to you and Jim, and Sandy, you and I met in person for the first time a decade ago. And as I was listening, I was remembering, and I'm imagining listeners to the show right now can do the same thing. If I think back to how I felt 10 years ago, even though I was deeply immersed in consciousness, and there were certain aspects of the work I was doing and what I was experiencing that are still present today, I do really feel like a very different person in my inner body, in the way that I respond to things. There are some things that remind me of who I was 10 years ago, but they are now in the vast minority of who I've become. So for me, as I was listening to you two, I was thinking about that, how you were talking about trance states and it's a little bit like being in a dream. And it does feel to me that this new human is something that is birthing inside all of us who are perhaps the bridge generation. And every generation is a bridge, but there is often this message that we're a bridge generation for this transitionary time that we're in. And so I personally identify with this, and as I was listening to you, I was getting this message that if we all cast our minds back to 10 years ago, some people, it might be 5, but try 10, and just think of how differently you felt, perceived, sensed the world back then. Even if there are some things that remind you of 10 years ago, it's quite a different experience in our body, and that's partly because of what we have gone through in our own personal journey. And it also shows you how much the very fabric of the world has changed in this last 10 years, and how we as a world and a collective are just experiencing things vastly differently to the generations before us.
Yeah, I mean, you've summed it up really, really well. I was thinking about this myself recently, a 20-year journey that I took, which in a way has just kind of come to a completion. And when I think back to the thoughts, the beliefs, everything that I lived 20 years ago is so different now. I could never have anticipated or conceived of how different the perspectives would be.
And it's interesting because as you were speaking, I just got this really clear insight about you, Sandy, which I think is relevant to all of us, which was, and I'm going to ask you the question actually, do you yourself feel the truth that for you, this next decade is going to be the most important decade for you in terms of any work or mission that you've had on Earth so far?
Absolutely.
Because I feel that, as you were talking, I was just thinking, oh God, yeah, now she's really about to go somewhere. Now that chapter's done. Now she's really going to go deep, whatever that means, because for some people going deep means affecting millions more people, and for other people going deep means you scale everything down and you really shift the energy in a small number of people that then ripples out, So I feel that for you, and I feel that for all of us. And Jim was alluding to that, how we're in this time of change. And the thing that I got this month as a kind of September to December message was, it's not that the outside world is going to slow down in the next 4 months, but there is an energetic sense of reprieve for anybody who has gone through the last 4, 5, 6 months in an intense way because of the new that's coming in. And whenever new energy is coming in to our lives, to the planet, it brings with it a certain nutrition and a certain food, if you like. And so most people are going to be able to feel that in the next few months, just this feeling of possibility. And interestingly, those of us on our hemisphere are going into the winter, but in a way, energetically, it's a little bit like going into a summer in the next 4 months in terms of your capacity. And I think part of that is the ability to come out of the trance and feel your life force when it's time for your life force to say, no, I don't want this, I don't want that, and to get a little clearer. Whereas I think a lot of people have been perhaps asleep at the wheel in parts of their consciousness that hadn't yet grounded. And now in this next 4 months, what they've been working on internally behind the scenes, perhaps learning how to say no or how to say yes, is going to come out into action. So in the next 4 months, there's going to be more of a sense of birthing a new identity for yourself, or aspects of your identity, and putting them out into the world. And that will then have a knock-on effect on what comes back to you.
I think a lot of people are going to get very surprised by what they learn about themselves.
Yeah, I appreciated the way that Jim put it about people who are conscious getting to now see the next layers of unconsciousness in themselves. And I identify with that continuum that we go through. But I think that one of the things I see a lot with spiritually minded or conscious people, and I also have to check myself for this too, is there can be a tendency sometimes to be inactive when we should be active. So for example, you might see or feel things in a group, but you don't necessarily name it or do something to change it. And that's a spell that's kind of breaking for a lot of people now. So in a way, it's bringing to the ground and into action your spiritual truths, your consciousness truths, rather than them just being an inner experience or an ethereal experience that you're having privately inside yourself. Now is rubber meets the road time, where people are getting to bring that out into life. And I think the gift of that is it brings life force to everybody. And the fear in that is often, oh, well, it might be a bit messy. It's okay if it's messy. It's okay if you have a conversation with someone that isn't neat and tidy and resolved. And I think sometimes people who follow spiritual teachings or are very spiritually minded can avoid that stuff. Whereas actually to be human is to co-create with each other, even if sometimes we co-create a mess that we then have to figure out how to clean up. I mean, that's part of the journey and part of the learning, right?
Absolutely. Do you think, I think many people will also feel a lot of fear, because we always fear the unknown, we always fear change, simply because it's unfamiliar and we don't have a frame of reference for it. But I noticed in your newsletter you talked about some people going through a dark night of the soul. Could you say a little bit about that for anyone who is feeling this change coming and is afraid of it?
Yes, that surprised me. I mean, often when I do an energy update, there are a few things that surprise me and there are a few things that I relate to. But one of the things that I reflected on after I'd recorded the video was I backtracked through a few conversations I'd had within the past few months, and lo and behold, a few people had a real dark night of the soul. And dark night of the souls can be massive experiences, the kind of thing that brings you to your knees for a year or a year and a half, whether it's triggered by an illness or the loss of a loved one or divorce, or you lose all your money, or one of those things that triggers us into a massive shift around who we thought we were until that shift occurred. And then all of a sudden the shift occurs and it's like you're in a hurricane. Now, we can also have small dark nights of the soul. Your life might be okay, but you, for 2 years, have not known what it is that you want to do with your work, and that's bothered you. So a lot of people have gone through these dark nights, and the thing about dark nights of the soul is when you're in them, they feel awful. There's no getting around it. Any of us who've been in them, it's like some days you just want to die when you're in them. But it's because you are dying. Because when you go through a dark night of the soul, it's a very shamanic transformation process. It's no different to the chrysalis process that the caterpillar goes through to turn into the butterfly. You are rebirthing yourself, but you're doing it while awake, while conscious, and while you're watching everything around you crumble so that something else can be born in its place. And we're very safety programmed. You know, as human beings, we are programmed to try and keep ourselves alive and to try and keep ourselves safe, and that's just hardwired into the DNA. And so it's very alarming when it looks like everything in our life is going to pot, as we would say in England, or, you know, going south, as you'd say elsewhere. But actually, the truth is we sometimes need those times where the ground is leveled. And apparently that has been going round. And interestingly, when we released the energy update and I saw the comments appearing online in the first few days, a lot of people were like, oh my God, I've been through this. This is exactly what's been going on for me. And so the message was, if you've been going through a dark night of the soul, get curious about what's coming next. And also don't get too seduced by your idea of the past, which we all do. We all tend to look back on something that happened and we glorify it. We go, oh, that relationship that I had was so special. And we forget the parts or the days of that relationship where there were struggles and it wasn't so good. And what we're forgetting is that actually the only reason we're having that memory is not so that we can look back and just have remorse for what we don't have anymore. That memory is inviting us to recreate that energy anew in our life. So we tend to be very backward focused in our mind because the mind only tracks history. And yet our energy body is always calling us forward into new experience. So Dark Night of the Soul is kind of trampling on the past and really going through an experience where your identity shifts before you step into something new. So kind of makes sense to me that quite a lot of people would have been going through one of those before they step into a new future in this coming months and year.
You know, over the last, 10, 12 years or more, we've heard so much about manifestation, creating what you want, creating your own reality, etc., etc., etc. It's almost become a cliche now. However, that said, it is becoming more and more apparent, certainly to me and many of the people I know, that we really do have the ability to create our own reality. And you touch upon this in your update, energy update, you know, talking about how we really can decide what we want next in our life. And in fact, even the current astrology is bearing that out and supporting that now is the time to make those decisions.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer of doing that collectively too. I remember many years ago when I was a little triggered by some of the doom and gloom prophecies that were out there around 2012. You know, I asked my guides about this transition in the world, and they were very clear, and they've maintained this for 6 years, how there are shifts that we are going to see, and it will get a little messy and a little uncomfortable, but that ultimately the transformation is what's going to play out. It isn't going to be that people are going to be trapped and controlled. And I bring that up just in allusion to what you and Jim were talking about. So to go back to what you said about manifesting, I think it's very scary to us to believe that we could change our reality with some focus, because we get so trapped in our patterns. And yet the truth is we are here to experience. And I love the Russell Brand quote where I can't remember it exactly, but it's something like, I wish everyone in the world could get rich and famous so that they could see that it is not the dream they think it is, and it comes with as many problems as it does gifts. And I think that's the gift of manifestation. It's like sometimes we glorify what we want to manifest, certainly when you're new to manifesting, but actually when you get into it, you start to realize that every experience is valid. Every experience has a slightly different shade. Some are very pleasurable, some are challenging, but that as you learn to consciously create and manifest for yourself, it actually helps you to let go of some mental ideas about better, worse. You just start to land in your life in a certain way. At least that's been my experience and the experience of many people I've worked on that with.
You also mentioned in your update that many people that you know have had healer burnout or a healer crisis. Is this part of a kind of general breaking down, as you said, dark night of the soul before renewal?
Yes, I think a lot of people who've been healing in a certain way for a long time are being asked to do slightly different things or do it in a different way. And also we've got a new wave of people who want to be healers coming in. So as we all get to go through this growth and renewal, healers who've done it for a while can get to choose differently. But I was struck by that. I think healer burnout is a common thing. I think it's all about learning to balance your energy and not over giving your energy out without checking that you're refueling for yourself. But it was interesting to me that theme has come up, and that was actually a channel in that we put into my members community this past month that was really talking about how that is going round. Many healers are changing their identity either in the way they work or the form of what they do, and many new healers are coming in, and that you can welcome that. It's actually a good change for everybody.
Lee, any advice for anybody who's struggling at the moment?
Well, trust that there are many other people struggling too, and I think reaching out and talking to other people who are being honest about what they're going through really helps. Don't compare what you're going through to someone else's happy photo on Facebook, because you never know how miserable they were a minute before that was taken. I think sometimes when you're stuck and isolated in your own stuff, you can burrow down into it, and I'm a big believer in do what you can to change your energy when you can. Even if you're depressed, take a short walk around the block, make an intention to the universe. I ask for help to change this state. I ask for help to change this state. I think a big part of it is recognizing that it can change and that light and support can come to you, but we have to ask for it and we have to consciously co-direct it. So anybody listening, if that resonates, if all you can bring yourself to do is make that intention, and then you will see how that intention said over and over again in the next days will actually start to change the energy. But back it up with action. Check you're eating well, check you've got good people in your life, reach out to a friend, make sure you're soothing your nervous system. There are many small things we can do, and there are some more tips in this month's energy update if people wanted to check that out from me.
Lee Harris, as always, thank you.
A pleasure, Sandy. Always great to be with you. Thank you.
You too. Speak to you next month, Lee.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to What is Going On's Energy and Integration series. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and after this break, we'll be hearing from visionary speaker, author, telepathic communicator, and multidimensional seer Suzy Miller. So don't go away.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
I'm Fidel Nsombo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America, and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to segment 3 of the Energy and Integration series, and to Suzy Miller. Suzy Miller, I can almost feel you champing at the bit. Having read your newsletter this month, I know that so much has come up that you have been referring to yourself. So go at it. What do you want to say?
Honestly, Sandy, so true. I'm just grinning from ear to ear. I mean, just listening to Lee and you and Jim, and it really is an amazing time. And as I say that, I can also say that, you know, what Lee was saying about like these dark nights of the soul that are going on right now. I just want to put a little shout out to those of you who are having those kinds of experiences. I've just kind of been through another one myself. And one of the things that I can say is that there really is this deep and beautiful purging of you know, if we're going to call what's coming up next the new human, the old human, it's gone. I mean, it's disintegrating left, right, and everywhere. And it's so important that it does. And as Lee was saying, a lot of times, you know, we like, as human beings, we like to stay comfortable. And what I'm noticing right now is I'm noticing that regardless of whether people like to stay comfortable or not, many are in this process of birthing what I call the one you, the one them, right? And as they start birthing that totality of themselves as the new human, they will absolutely go through a disintegration of everything that was the old. And, you know, I love when Jim says things like, you know, you can't take your baggage with you, because it's absolutely true. But the other side of that is that I don't think that sometimes we value enough that when that baggage is coming to the forefront, when it's coming up again, not to make us wrong, not to make us bad, not to have us go back into the old patterns or the old human limitations, let's say, but it's coming up to let us know that it is passing on. And as that energy does come up, if we can meet it with compassion, I mean, I think Michael Brown from the Presence Process, his statement is, let it come, pass on. You know, have compassion for that which is arising within each and every one of us right now, because this confusion and, you know, kind of playing out of old cycles so that we can close out that cycle, all of this is kind of I would say even a predetermined opportunity to really begin to claim this new human experience. And I agree with Lee 110% about this kind of September until the end of the year is not just about things lightening up, but now that we've kind of been through those dark nights of the soul, now that we've started to purge these different old programs, let's say, I believe that through September through December, we're really going to get to be present to the part of ourselves that unifies all of it. So it's no longer going to be that we're a quote-unquote light worker, right? It's literally allowing and having compassion for all of it. So we're becoming, it's like the difference between shifting from the duality of light and dark to being in a reality of neutral, from being in duality to being in oneness. And that's why I was talking in my newsletter about birthing the one you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
One of the other things too, you're going to just let me roll, aren't you? Which is great.
I'm eager to hear what you've got to say next.
Well, one of the other things I wanted to add is you and Jim were talking about the generation before, and you were talking about, how kind of these kids right now are experiencing things and that. And I have a little different take on that. What I've been watching, and I've had the opportunity lately to work with families and kids where the kids are like, I would say 20-something, and males and females. But what I'm really seeing is these males that are 20-something, and it's almost like whatever emotional energy and emotional baggage, let's say, that the generation before did not really clear up or for whatever reason, there's no blame here. They either couldn't look at it, or didn't have the tools to look at it. However you want to view that, what I'm noticing is it's almost like these kids are acting out in such extraordinary ways. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, what's that about? And the more I checked in with it, the more I realized that these kids it's almost like they're collecting up not just their, let's say, their personal luggage or their personal baggage, but they're collecting up the lineage baggage. And they're saying, we're not going any further until we all deal with this collective lineage baggage. Because, when we move from old human, if you want to call it that, to the new human experience, what we really begin to realize very quickly is almost nothing is personal. Almost nothing is being done simply because we're trying to gift something to ourselves. We really are shifting from this duality and this separateness to this oneness. So we recognize and we realize, we see with real eyes that anything that is happening into and through us is happening into and through the whole. And so it's been fascinating to me to watch these kids say, almost escalating, and especially from, I will say, from January until now, I've really seen this with these 20-somethings. And I'm going, wow, it's like they literally are putting their foot down through their behaviors, through their anxieties, through their stresses, and saying, no, this is a collective lineage issue. We either all deal with it together or things go awry very quickly. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And the question is, are you seeing more people dealing with it together? Or are we, by and large, still avoiding it, and the kids are still having to put their feet down and say no further until you do?
Well, I think that is the case. But the fact is that, unfortunately, the old human programming really does respond to pain, And so even people will allow themselves to be in a certain level of discomfort. And so if you want to talk about those individuals that are still working through the old programming, what you're going to be noticing is they're going to get really uncomfortable. And I think that's, if we want to look at political things and that kind of stuff too, I think that's part of why we're getting so uncomfortable. It's like there are feelings that haven't been felt, and there are programs that haven't been purged. And again, we're not purging them individually, we're purging them collectively. And so when we have these opportunities, because either our kids are acting like crazy people or the government's acting like crazy people, or we get the opportunity to kind of dip into feelings that we haven't necessarily been willing to feel before. And I can share that I'm understanding this, I guess, at a whole different level right now because I've just been through another purging myself, and just like we all think that we've done the work, as Jim was saying, it's like we're going through these deeper and deeper levels and experiences and expressions that can come to the surface. But the cool thing is if this information is coming to the surface now, if these programs are coming up to be looked at, it's because they can. It's because in our newness, in our repatterning, we are big enough, vast enough, broad enough to really look at and be present to some of these old limited patterns. Really exciting.
It is exciting. I want to touch on something while we still have time that I know is very close to your heart, and I know that the collective consciousness of the children time and time again have communicated to you the importance of love. And this is a subject that I think few of us really understand. And right now, what we are seeing in the world around us is an awful lot of reflections of not love. Everywhere we look, in some of the, the behaviours and the things that are happening that are just shocking people into complete, silence because they've not dealt with things like this before. We are seeing so much evidence of not love. What do we need to do to find our way back to love? What do the children say to you? What help can they, wisdom do they offer?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to give a little bit of a different definition to what people might think love is. And what I really believe love is, having connected with the kids over and over again, and it's presence. It's, can we be present to whatever is going on? So again, from a place of the new human, not theory, not concept, but actually day in, day out experience. Can we be present to that which is beautiful and that which is ugly with an equal sense of presence? So, and by presence, that means simply being with it, witnessing it, noticing it, being aware of how it makes you feel, being aware of what is available for you within that experience. But that's it. It's to be present to something. You think about it, if you take this back to a parent that is, let's say, the idyllic parent or the good parent, right, whatever we want to call that. When that child comes and that child is positive and loving and wonderful, can the parent just be present with that? When the child comes and they're throwing a hissy fit and they're screaming and yelling, can the parent just be present to that, right? So we're not, and I think that that's really what love is. And when we allow it to be just presence, then we really realize that, love does make the world go round, and our presence is all that's required. We hear that all the time, but it wasn't until probably a month ago when somebody said that to me. They said, be here. We just would like you to be here. And I was like, well, what would I, quote unquote, do while I was there? No. We don't want you to do anything. We simply want your presence here, because your presence will bring something to the experience, right? Well, our presence always brings something to the experience. Our presence brings love. It brings our totality. It brings our oneness. It brings our neutrality, you know, and I think that that's what we're really moving into, you know, as we kind of shift from old human programming to new human programming, you know, and the difference is duality and unity.
Yeah, presence. I mean, that's a really important point you've made there, and it's a wonderful explanation of what love is. I think we're almost out of time now, Suzy. We haven't had time to do any energy balancing, any integration work, but very, very quickly, can you tell our listeners who might want to take advantage of that about your energy session, when and how?
Yeah, absolutely. This month it actually starts on Monday, or we'll have one on Monday, so anybody can join that one. And that will be a pretty detailed piece of energy work and awareness around birthing the one you. So we'll continue this conversation there.
Okay, and people can find out more about that at SuzyMiller.com. That's it for tonight's Energy and Integration show. Jim Self, Lee Harris and Suzy Miller will be back on Thursday, October the 4th, so do make a date to join us. You'll find out more about Lee Harris at LeeHarrisEnergy.com. Jim, of course, resides at MasterinAlchemy.com. And I will see you next week for one of the regular What Is Going On shows.